The year was 1305, and the land of Scotland bled. The English king's banners loomed like thunderclouds across our hills, and every glen whispered of betrayal. I had fought for freedom under Wallace himself, my sword raised for a cause I barely understood at first, but one I came to bleed for. After Falkirk, after the forest burned and our ranks scattered, I hid among the heather with a handful of men. Ghosts more than soldiers now. We moved by night, sleeping in churchyards and barns, haunted by the echo of drums that no longer beat for us. The English called us rebels. Aye, perhaps we were, but better a rebel than a slave. The rains came that summer without end. The soil turned to mire, and our cloaks were never dry. We stole bread from carts bound for the garrison, striking fast and vanishing into the mist. I remember one night near Stirling, the air thick with smoke from a distant manor the English had torched. We watched from a ridge as its roof collapsed, the glow of the flames reflecting in the eyes of my brother-in-arms, Fergus. "They'll pay for this," he muttered. But even then, I think we both knew payment was a dream. The king's justice was coming north, and it bore no mercy for men like us. Rumours reached us through the shepherds. Wallace had been taken, captured near Glasgow, betrayed by a Scot with an English purse. The words hit like a blade to the gut. Wallace, the unbroken spirit of our fight, dragged in chains to London. I wanted to believe it false. I wanted to think him still out there, rallying men beneath some hidden banner. But the truth settled on us heavy as winter frost. The rebellion, they said, was finished. I remember sitting by the fire that night, the rain hissing on the coals, my heart a hollow drum. Fergus stared into the flames and said, "Then it falls to us to remember him." That was the last time I saw him alive. We tried to make for the highlands, to the mountains where the king's reach grew thin, but the roads crawled with patrols, and the clans feared harbouring us. Each village we entered was a gamble. A roof one night could mean a noose the next. Hunger drove us to risk it. One dawn, near Perth, a farmer's daughter brought us milk and oatcakes. She smiled like she pitied us, and I felt shame crawl beneath my skin. She said the English were offering pardons for rebels who surrendered. "You'd be wise to take it," she whispered. I almost laughed. A pardon? There was no pardon for those who had drawn steel against Edward's crown. The day of my capture came without battle, without glory. We had camped in a glen thick with fog, our fire buried low. I woke to the sound of hooves and the glint of iron. Arrows hissed before I could rise. Fergus fell beside me, blood dark on his chest. I remember the weight of English mail pressing down as they bound my wrists, the cold bite of steel on my throat. A voice, sharp and foreign, barked orders I barely understood. When I looked up, I saw the red cross of St. George above me. I thought of the farmer's daughter. Perhaps she had spoken, perhaps not. It no longer mattered. Betrayal was the coin of these times. They marched us south under armed escort, through villages where folk stared as if we were beasts in chains. Some spat, others crossed themselves. I tried to keep my head high, though my legs trembled from the beating they'd given me. At night they tethered us like cattle. I counted the stars above the campfires, whispering prayers to saints who had long stopped listening. Once an English knight asked me, "Why do you fight a lost war?" I said nothing, but in my mind I answered, "Because it is ours to lose." By the time we reached Stirling, my wrists were raw, and my pride hung by threads. The castle gates opened with the sound of doom itself. I was thrown into a cell slick with moss and the stench of rot. In the corner lay another man, his face hidden in shadow. He whispered that they'd hang us come morning, or worse, send us to London to stand trial like Wallace. I lay there, the coal stone beneath me, thinking of the hills I'd never see again. The wind moaned through the cracks above, like the voice of Scotland herself, grieving but unbroken. I lost count of the days in that dungeon. The light that filtered through the slit in the wall was the only thing that told me the world outside still moved. The English jailers brought stale bread and a tin of water once a day, never speaking more than a grunt. The man in the corner, a farmer from Fife, they said, coughed until his ribs cracked, then fell silent one night and never rose again. They dragged him out by his ankles. I prayed for his soul and wondered if mine was already beyond saving. The cell stank of death and iron, and yet I feared freedom more, for what freedom meant now was a rope and a crowd. They questioned me after the third sunrise. A knight in a crimson surcoat led me to a room above the cells. A parchment lay on the table, heavy with seals. "You fought with Wallace," he said in his clipped southern tongue. "Confess it, and you may live." His words dripped with mockery. I looked at the parchment, at the quill waiting beside it, and thought of what Wallace might have done. I told him I fought for no man's banner, but Scotland's. His mouth twitched, not anger, but amusement. "Scotland?" he repeated, as if the word itself were folly. He nodded to the guards. They struck me once across the jaw and twice to the ribs before dragging me back below. That night I dreamt of the Highlands, of mist curling over the lochs and the cry of eagles above the glens. I dreamt of home, but when I woke I found myself still in the dark, the taste of blood in my mouth. Somewhere above, the bells of Stirling tolled, and the echo crawled down the stones like a lament. I began to wonder if perhaps the English were right, if the fight had died with Wallace, if we were chasing ghosts. Yet even in that pit, when I closed my eyes, I saw his banner rising through the smoke, and the doubt burned away like frost under sun. Weeks passed, or perhaps months. They moved us from Stirling to Berwick, where more Scots filled the cages. Some had lost ears or fingers, trophies taken for their defiance. Among them I met a lad no older than 17. His name was Callum, a blacksmith's son from Ayr. He spoke of how the English garrison burned his father's forge, how he'd taken up a hammer in place of a sword. There was still fire in his eyes, the kind that made me remember myself. "We'll not die cowed," he said one night. "We'll die Scots." His voice was fierce enough that even the guards paused outside the cell. In him I saw the spirit they could never chain. In Berwick they paraded us through the streets for the townsfolk to see. English merchants jeered, tossing refuse as we passed. Children followed, laughing at our torn kilts and bruised faces. I held my head high, even as stones struck my back. Let them see what rebellion looked like, not with banners and glory, but with scars and silence. At the docks, ships flew the king's sigil, ready to carry men and grain south. One guard sneered, "You'll sail too, rebel, but in irons." I spat blood at his boots. He struck me so hard my vision burst into stars. When I came to, I was already aboard. The journey to London was a torment of its own. Salt air stung my wounds, and the sea never rested. At night, the English sang songs of victory, their voices rising over the waves. I listened and thought of how those same waves once carried Norsemen and traders to our shores. Now they carried us, bound and beaten, to meet our fate. Callum grew ill halfway through the voyage. He begged for water, and I gave him what I could from my own ration. He smiled faintly, whispering, "You'll tell them, won't you? You'll tell them we fought, I promised I would," though in my heart I feared there'd be no one left to hear it. When we reached the mouth of the Thames, fog hung low and grey over the water. The city rose before us like a beast of stone, towers, spires, and smoke, London, the place where Wallace had been judged and butchered. The guards whispered of it as if it were holy ground. I felt my blood chill. Somewhere in that labyrinth of streets, my fate waited. As they led us off the ship, I looked back once toward the northern horizon. The sky was pale, but I fancied I could see the highlands there, distant and unbroken, watching. I whispered a vow beneath my breath. If I am to die here, let my death not be in silence. They kept us in the Tower of London. The name fits well, for it is less a fortress than a tomb. Rats moved freely beneath the straw, and the walls sweated with damp. From the narrow slit above my cell, I could see nothing but a shard of sky, and once the glint of the Thames. Every few hours, the clanging of iron doors echoed through the corridors as another prisoner was dragged to questioning. Some returned broken, their wills ground to dust. Others never returned at all. The guards called it mercy when the questioning ended quickly. I prayed that mine would not. The day of my trial came without warning. They pulled me from the cell before dawn, chained my wrists, and led me through halls heavy with the stink of tallow and smoke. The court was held in Westminster Hall, vast beyond imagining, its stone vaults rising higher than any kirk I'd ever seen. The nobles sat in their finery like crows in judgment. At their centre, on a raised dais, sat the English justiciar, robed in crimson. "You stand accused of treason against His Majesty, King Edward of England," he declared. "What say you?" The hall fell silent. My voice trembled, but I forced the words through clenched teeth. "I owe no fealty to an English king. I am a Scot, and free-born." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The justiciar's lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Then you have confessed enough." The verdict was never in doubt. They sentenced me as they had sentenced Wallace, to be hanged, drawn, and quartered. When the words were spoken, a strange calm fell over me. Death was no longer a threat, only a destination. They led me away while the nobles signed their seals, sealing my fate with wax and laughter. Back in the cell, I sat beside Callum. Though the voyage had weakened him, he still lived. When I told him what awaited me, he only nodded. "Then die well," he said. "So they'll remember us as men, not ghosts." He grasped my hand through the chains and whispered a prayer. I did not sleep again that night. I watched the light creep across the wall, slow and pale like the hand of time itself. At sunrise, the bells tolled. The guards came for me. They tied my wrists behind my back and placed a coarse rope around my neck. As we marched through the streets, people poured from the alleys to see the spectacle. Merchants, beggars, even children perched on barrels. Some spat, others stared in silence. I searched their faces and wondered if they saw a villain or a man. When we reached Smithfield, the gallows loomed tall and black against the morning sky. They bound me to a wooden cart, my body dragged through the mud, while the crowd shouted curses. Yet amidst the jeering, I heard one faint voice cry out, "For Scotland!" I never saw who spoke it, but those two words were enough to lift my head. The executioner met my eyes without malice. To him I was just another duty. He adjusted the rope, muttered a prayer in Latin, and stepped aside. I thought then of the hills of my youth, of the heather blooming purple after rain, of my mother's song carried on the wind. I thought of Wallace and the men who had died beside him. "You can break our bodies," I whispered, "but not the heart of Scotland." The cart lurched forward. The world blurred. My breath caught in my throat as the rope bit deep. Darkness closed in, then flared again in fragments. Voices, movement, the slice of the blade. Pain burned, then vanished. I remember the sky above me, pale and endless, and the sound of gulls crying far away. When I woke, if waking it was, I stood on a green field, the air still and bright. A river ran nearby, clear as glass, and there were others there. Faces I knew, men who'd fallen long before me. Wallace stood among them, smiling faintly, his banner whole and unstained. "You kept the faith," he said. "That is enough." I wanted to tell him that Scotland still lived, that her people would rise again, but no words came. He placed a hand on my shoulder, and the pain, the hunger, the chains, all faded into nothing. Only the wind remained, whispering through the grass, carrying a single word. Freedom. They say the English displayed my head on London Bridge, and my limbs across the towns of the borderlands. Let them. Let my bones bleach beneath their sun. For so long as one Scot remembers, one voice whispers my name, I will not be gone. The cause we carried cannot be killed by rope or blade. One day our land will rise again, and the crown they sought to steal will shine where it belongs. And when that day comes, I pray they'll remember not my death, but that I faced it unbroken,